Good morning. Thank you for joining. This is a very exciting course, and I do want to give a big credit to David, even though he's very humble, that he inspired we do this class. So thank you, David. We appreciate it. I'll share a little overview on what Tanya is, where it comes from, and why we feel that it's important and relevant to study it and get into it. And then we'll talk a little bit about the approach on how we hope to cover this study during this course, and we'll get into it. So, Tanya was written by a great rabbi known as the Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi. Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi is also known as the Alter Rebbe, which means the older rabbi, and he is the first Rebbe of Chabad. Tanya was written, if I'm not mistaken, in the year 1799 or maybe 1800. So a bit over 200 years ago. And the Tanya is considered the foundational work, the foundational teaching of Hasidus, of Chabad Hasidus. It's based on ideas of Kabbalah and other aspects of Torah as well. And the goal of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe writes, is to be able to teach a person how to be able to find a close path of connection with God. That's basically the idea of Tanya. There's a passage in the Torah that says the following: Ki karov eilecha hadavar meod beficha ubilvavcha la'asoto. That this thing, it says hadavar, this thing is close to you in your mouth and your heart to do it. What's this thing? So the simple understanding of the thing is the Torah. That this thing, the Torah, is very close, it's accessible. It's in your mouth, it's in your heart, and you could do it. So in the words of the Alter Rebbe, he says, Leva'er heitev, to explain very well, Ech ze karov meod. How exactly is it so close? Why is it so close? Maybe some of us don't feel that it's that close. Maybe we don't feel that it's accessible. Maybe we don't feel it's reachable. Maybe we don't feel it's relatable. Maybe you feel it's like foreign. So what does it mean it's so close? And the emphasis in the Torah is that it's close in your mouth, it's close in your heart, and it's close to do it. So it's not only enough that it should be close and reachable, that I could do it. Anybody can do it. Anybody can do anything. But is it in my heart? Is it in my mouth? Do I talk about it? Do I think about it? Do I connect with it? And the idea of the Tanya is to help us understand how this is really, truly accessible and reachable and relatable to every single one of us. So that's what the Alter Rebbe notes in the title page of the Tanya. That's what he's hoping to accomplish. But then in his introduction, he gets quite a bit more elaborate in what the goal is and how the Alter Rebbe aims to accomplish this. And essentially, in summary, what he explains there, the kind of the crux of what the Alter Rebbe says is as follows. He says that over the years, he's spoken with many, many, many people. Privately, in group settings, people came and sought guidance and advice on how to be able to improve their service of God, how to be able to find a deeper connection with Hashem, personal challenges, things that they're going through in their own emotional matters, psychological matters, and how to be able to overcome all of that and be able to find a joyful, direct path of closeness with God. And he explains that with time, obviously the burden and the time-consuming the effort that it takes to be able to address each individual privately and personally is very consuming. And ultimately, it's limiting. So you can't really talk to everybody. So what he wants to do is he wants to write a book that collects all of the ideas and all of the instructions and all of the conversations that he's had, kind of putting it into a manual in a way that anyone who faces any kind of issue could study the manual and find the solution, find the answer that they're looking for to be able to address their personal situation. And he goes into great detail describing how there are different kinds of writings, the different kinds of works. There are people that write, but they write in a broad, general form. So sometimes it's relatable, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you identify with it, and sometimes not. You can't write something that will talk to everyone. So you write in general terms. Then he talks about how there are teachings of Torah that are more direct because they're truth. So you have to be able to find a connection with it. But not everybody can understand it. Not everybody knows how to interpret it in a way that's relevant to them. What the Alter Rebbe hopes to accomplish, he says, is that I'm writing in a way that it's personal because I know who I'm dealing with. I'm addressing people who have spoken with me, who have opened up their hearts, they're opened up about their personal situation, so I know them well, so I can address them in a very direct way. And it's based on Torah, so it has the truth of Torah. So it really has like the full picture of everything combined together. And then he says that the goal is not only for the people that he knew at that time when he wrote this book, but for all future generations. Anyone who will study the Tanya will be able to find the personal solution for their issues, their own personal issues. And he says, well, how do you expect that to happen? So he says, well, my expectation is that those scholars who understand the Tanya very well will make themselves available to help people who are looking for guidance, who are looking for direction, and they turn to the Tanya for some kind of influence in that sense. And maybe they're not sure where to find the answers to their problems, that the scholars who understand the Tanya well can listen to the individual, hear what their issue is, and then help them find the reference to their issue in the Tanya. So that's basically kind of how he sets to accomplish this. But ultimately, the concept, and we can say even, the broadness of mind and broadness of shoulders, the achrayut, the responsibility to take on such a mission, to say, I'm going to write a book that for all future generations, for all future time, anybody that needs guidance can find their solution here. It's a big thing to say. It's a big statement. And 200 years later, we could look back and say that the Alter Rebbe was very successful. And it's incredible that till today, people turn to the Tanya for guidance, and they find these ideas, the solutions that they're looking for. Obviously, you have to understand and know how to study it, and it's not something you can necessarily pick up on your own and just read through it and say, okay, I found it. Like the Alter Rebbe himself said, he's relying on those scholars who are going to help people understand it and learn it and identify with it. So that's kind of the goal. This is what we're trying to get to. And let's try to apply that perspective while we're studying. That all along through the study, we remain with a question and say, okay, how do I identify with this? Where does this fit with my personal journey, with my personal situation? How do I find my reality in this discussion? And if you didn't, then it's not because it's not there, but it's maybe because you didn't yet direct it or kind of develop it in the right way to be able to find that. Because ultimately the expectation is that each and every one of us and anyone who will ever study the Tanya should be able to identify with the issues that are being discussed and find comfort, guidance, and direction through them. So it's a big deal. It's an incredible opportunity. Now let's see how well we do at it. All right? Okay.
Just in general, what is the language, like the original language, Sfat HaMakor, that it was written?
Great question. It was written in Hebrew. Yeah.
So I can read it in Hebrew.
You could read it in Hebrew.
I have a question.
Please.
You said earlier something, it sounded to me like two words. It was Chabad and then another word.
Chassidus.
Yes. Chassid. Aren't they the same thing?
Great question. Hashem. בבקשה.
לא תודה.
שב.
איפה הכיפות?
זה למטה, אני חושב.
מרגישה. דקה.
So Chassidus was founded by the Baal Shem Tov, and it's a form of study of Torah, and within Chassidus itself there are various different schools or branches of that. Chabad Chassidus is one form of Chassidut
So is the form of study with the boys going into yeshiva and just continuing to study Torah and that sort
They
of
study
thing?
Hasidus as well. Yeah, they study Talmud, they study Jewish law. It's one of the areas that they study. If you want to kind of get into the specifics of what differentiates the form of Chabad Hasidut, Boker Tov, welcome, versus other types of Hasidut. Chabad stands for Chochmah Binah Daf. We're going to get into that, which means wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And the approach of Chabad Hasidus, which differs from other forms, is that it's very intellectually based, meaning it goes into understanding everything and explaining in a very intellectual manner, and through that hopes to inspire emotional results. Whereas other forms of Chassidut are kind of more talking to the heart. They're like very emotionally driven, and so it's a bit of a different approach.
I don't want to derail.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Great question, though. Thank you. Welcome. אתה רוצה קפה או תה או משהו? בבקשה.
Like in New York, you may say like the Satmar.
Satmar. Yeah, there's many branches. There's like probably tens. Okay, so having said all that, we're going to jump in now into chapter 1. Oh, I mentioned that I was going to discuss a little bit of the kind of the manner and how we hope to be able to cover this course. So what I'm hoping we can accomplish is each week we'll basically cover one chapter. We're not going to read word for word inside the text. Go. This was written 200 and so some years ago, but Judaism has been going on for thousands of years. So where did this come from? Suddenly this revolutionary book of Jewish perspective lands, and it's like, what? Jews managed for thousands of years without it. Where did this come from? Who is this? What is this for? Where is this from? Where does this connect as a direct continuation of authentic Judaism that's been going on for thousands of years? So the Alter Rebbe writes in his title page, he says this book is called Sefer Shel Benonim, which we'll talk about this soon. And he says Melukat, which means it's gathered. The ideas here are gathered. Mipi Sfarim umipi Sofrim Kedoshei Elyon. They're gathered from books and from writers that are from our history. He doesn't get into specifics of which books specifically, but he basically essentially saying is, I'm not telling you anything new. I'm maybe presenting it in a different way. I didn't invent anything new. Everything I'm sharing with you here is all based on ideas that have been talked about in Torah, in Talmud, in Mishnah, in Medrash, in Kabbalah, and everything. By the way, Kabbalah wasn't invented by the Baal Shem Tov. This is Chassidut. Kabbalah's been... Avraham Avinu wrote a book, Sefer Yetzirah, which is a book of Kabbalah. So Kabbalah's been, with Jews all throughout the time, ever since God gave us the Torah in Har Sinai, and even before that. So all of these ideas are based and founded on teachings of Torah that have been around for all generations. And it's another way of explaining it and approaching it, but it's not new ideas. It's not things that, no one ever knew before.
Is the main difference making it accessible to all, giving it back to the Torah, versus you have to spend your life from childhood onwards studying the Torah, and then you can get access to the knowledge?
Yes, that's another part of that as well, which is that many of these ideas, many of these teachings were exclusive. And only certain people, certain scholars had access to these ideas. And one of the major revolutions of the Alter Rebbe was to begin to disseminate, to make Chassidut accessible and known to everybody. So yes, that's correct. That's another point.
It's like Kabbalah.
Chapter 1 of Tanya begins with a unload of questions, like a whole long list of questions Hello, hello. A whole long list of questions based on many different passages of the Talmud and many other things. The Alter Rebbe unloads a whole list of questions. And for somebody who is not familiar and used to studying Talmud and things like that, you can become overwhelmed. You're like, what in the world's going on over here? What are all these questions, one after another? And what are you trying to do? What are you trying to get to? Normally you ask a question, you give an answer. And here he goes through a whole list. It's like a whole page of question after question after question. It's like, what's your problem? Well, you woke up in the left side today. Like, what happened? But ultimately, this style of study is common in the realm of Talmud, but it also has a very important goal to accomplish when we're studying in general, especially when we're approaching to study the Tanya. One of the first things the Alter Rebbe wants to impress upon us is that as much as we know, and as much as we study, and as much as we feel confident in our perspective, he wants to challenge that reality and say, hey, do you really think you know it all? You think you've got it all figured out? Well, let me present to you a bunch of these questions. Can you answer any of them? Can you figure out what this is talking about? And suddenly you feel a little overwhelmed, and that's intentional. That overwhelming feeling is intentional to kind of break down a bit of this barrier, this intellectual shell that we may sometimes put on ourselves. Say, I got it, I know it. What do you mean? I know what's going on. I've got my life somewhat figured out. Well, maybe not so much. So it's intentional. And it's not necessarily for the purpose of addressing the questions and giving answers, which the Alter Rebbe will do that. He doesn't leave us in the dark. He does that much later on in chapters 12, 13, 14. He begins to address the questions head on. But at this point, the purpose of the questions is more so to kind of break our wall, that the barrier that we may put up on our mind to say, I know already everything. I know what's going on. Well, not necessarily. So let me share a few of the questions, a few of the ideas that the Alter Rebbe talks about. First thing is, the Alter Rebbe begins with a statement. The statement in the Talmud. The Talmud tells us that before a individual is born, the heavenly court brings the potential human that's going to be born, that wasn't even born yet, brings him to the heavenly tribunal and forces or imposes upon this future human to take an oath, to swear, shvuah. What's the oath that is presented upon this future human? That all of us, we all took this oath, we all accepted it. Tehi tzadik ve'al tehi rasha. Be righteous and don't be wicked. Before we're born, all of us, our souls, swore in heaven before we ever came here. We took an oath. And what was the oath? I'm going to be righteous and I'm not going to be wicked. Okay? It's very nice to take an oath about something you have no concept of, right? It's very nice. Be righteous, don't be wicked. For the soul, there's only one option in heaven. There's not too many choices. In heaven, everybody's righteous. Nobody's wicked. So it's easy for the soul to swear up in heaven and say, I'm going to be righteous, I'm not going to be wicked. And then suddenly he comes down here in this world and oy vavoy, what's going on? It's like there was a great tzaddik, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. He once complained to God. He said, God, you rigged this system. You didn't make this life fair. Because here, what you do is you put us in this world, and then you expect that we make good choices, and if we don't, we get punished. If we do, we get rewarded. But look, you didn't make the game fair. What'd you do? You took all the temptations of the world, and you put them right there, living alive in front of us. And all of the spirituality, all of the holiness, you stuck inside of books. You should have done it the other way around. If you put godliness out open in the world, and the temptations in the book, nobody would ever sin. You didn't do it right. It's not fair. So how do you expect a soul in heaven to swear, I'm going to be righteous and not be wicked? It never saw temptation. It doesn't know what it is. It doesn't understand even what it means to have a challenge, to not do the right thing, to feel sad, to feel depressed, to feel not interested. It doesn't have any of these issues. But yet somehow, this is what the Talmud says happens. So obviously, There's purpose in that. So we need to understand what's the purpose of that. And then the Alter Rebbe starts getting down into detail and saying, wait, be righteous and don't be wicked. What does it mean, righteous? What's the definition of tzaddik? What's the definition of righteous? And what's the definition of wicked? So I ask you, you tell me, what is righteous? Anybody here want to try? Don't worry, there's no right or wrong answer. You won't be stuck. What does it mean, righteous? How would you define tzaddik? Anybody?
I would say somebody who is kind to other people.
Okay.
You want me to keep going?
That's good.
Doesn't steal.
Doesn't steal. Okay.
Doesn't,
What if you steal once? Are you still righteous or not?
No.
That's it. Forever, you're gone. You lost your status.
I stole gum when I was younger.
what
That's
about-
it. You're doomed. Forget
about-
it, Mickey.
what about
Close the
Aladdin?
book. You have no hope.
Well, what about Aladdin? He had to steal because he was bred because he was hungry.
So what is that? So is that righteous or wicked?
I think it depends.
Depends. Okay. Getting confusing already. Okay, let's define wickedness. Anybody want to try? What's rasha? What's wicked? Somebody who steals, right? Well, how often? And depends for what. So we see it's very confusing. It's blurry. It's not so clear. It's not so black and white. So typically, sometimes people will say righteous is somebody who most of the time does the right thing. Okay, nobody's perfect, right? Nobody's perfect. So most of the time, you do the right thing. You're righteous. Overall, you're a good guy. Okay, so you're good. You're righteous. Wicked is somebody who, oh my God, like all of the time, they just don't do the right thing. What if a wicked person once in a while does something good? Are they righteous? No, they're still wicked. So they did one good thing, right? One good thing. You know the story with a guy who, all his life, he was a very wealthy individual, but he never helped anybody, never gave any money, nothing to anyone. And then comes the day he dies and he comes to heaven. And they start to judge him. They start to see what happened with this guy. And one case after another is being brought. Here there was an opportunity to help somebody and he said no, and this one needed help and he looked the other way. No, ever. That's it. You look at an individual like this, the heavenly court decides right away, this guy's going straight to the left side. There's no hope. But as they're about to, conclude the verdict, an angel comes running and says, wait. I have a merit. I have something in defense of the fellow. Okay, what is it? So he says one time he was walking down the street and somebody came and put their hand out and asked for help. And for some reason he was feeling a little inspired that day, and at his level. So he stuck his hand in his pocket and he took out a rusty nickel. And he gave him the nickel. So, listen, with all the wrong things he did, he's got one rusty nickel to his merit, to his defense. So the angel, the heavenly court says, let me see the nickel. Bring me the nickel. So they bring him the nickel. You want to see how much weight does it carry? So he brings the nickel to the guy, and the angel takes the nickel and tells the guy, take your nickel and go to hell. Right? That's it. You're done. You can take your nickel back. We don't need it. So somebody who's wicked, but one time does good, nobody's going to say he's righteous. Take your nickel and go. Who needs your one time you did a good thing? So often we'll define that righteous is somebody who's mostly good. Wicked is somebody who's mostly bad. The small little things here on the side, they don't matter. They don't help. They don't do anything. And then we have another term called Benoni. Benoni means what? Average, right? In Hebrew, what does Benoni mean? Average. Benoni can also mean the one in the middle. So what's Benoni? Half and half. Not all the time good, not all the time bad. He's kind of like, well-balanced, or not well-balanced, but balanced. You never know with this guy. He may be in the mood of, being righteous. He's a half righteous, half wicked. He's like, half and half. Okay? So that's one way of defining righteous and wicked. And Benoni, in between. And it seems very logical. It seems like it makes a lot of sense. In fact, there is support for this perspective in the Talmud. But then the Alter Rebbe tells us a story. It's one of the questions that he asks. Tells us a story. Listen to the story. There was a great sage in the Talmud. His name was Rabbah. Rabbah was such a great sage that all his life, basically all he did, he studied Torah. Lo pasik pumei migirsa, in the Aramaic terminology. His mouth never stopped saying words of Torah. So much so that it came the time for him to pass, and the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, came to get him, and he couldn't. because he was studying Torah, and when a person is in the middle of studying Torah, he can't get him. He's connected to a source of life, and he can never find him that he wasn't studying, so he can never get him. He had to make a whole trick. He made a loud noise, so he stopped for a second, and boom, he got him. That's Rabbah. You want to know who Rabbah was? There's many other stories about him in the Talmud. He performed miracles, an incredible individual, an incredible scholar. So Rabbah was once teaching his students, and among them was, one of the students was Abaye. He was also another great scholar of the Talmud, was a student of Rabbah. And Rabbah tells the students, they were talking about Rasha, Tzaddik, Beinoni. So he says, you want to know an example of a Beinoni? Who's a Beinoni? He says, Kegon, for example, Ana Beinoni. I'm a Beinoni. So Abaye says to his teacher, with all due respect, if you are Beinoni, what are we? Right? You're not leaving any space for us. If you're the Beinoni, all that's left for us is at best to be a Rasha. So what are we left at the table? No, Rabbah wasn't playing games. He wasn't a comedian. He wasn't just, small talk. So if he says, I'm a Beinoni, it must be that somehow there is another definition, an understanding of what a Beinoni is, that Rabbah had in mind. And based on that definition, it could be that Rabbah would be a Beinoni, even though he may have been speaking in a way of humility, but even humility has to have some association to truth. It can't be totally exaggerated. So we already start to see that our perception, our understanding of the definitions of tzaddik, rasha, beinoni, is totally misunderstood. We have no idea. We don't know what it is.
Well, could it be also that sometimes that, like you were saying, he was speaking with humility, that he was the Benoni, but the people that think that they're hubris to think that they are the tzaddik or a tzaddik, when they could be judging other people for not doing all the things they do, and all the time they study Torah and things like that. You know what I'm saying? That's why I love coming here, is because I'm not judged for things that I don't know, that is second nature to you because you've studied it your whole life, and I don't know. Does that make sense?
Jane, you're saying that if I claim to be a tzaddik, that claiming makes me not a tzaddik?
A little
Because
bit,
it's not
because
humble,
it's
right?
right. It's something that somebody else should say about you.
That's good.
Well, even with
Yeah.
Lashon Hara, we're not supposed to say good things about somebody or bad things about somebody, because people should make up their own decisions.
Right. Well, you shouldn't say good things if it's going to lead for people to kind of talk about the bad of somebody. But otherwise,
Oh, okay.
you could and should say positive things about others. Yeah, true. There's a verse, David's quoting correctly, that says, let others praise you and not yourself.
My father had a special interpretation. He said, let a stranger praise you, and if not, let your mouth go.
Either or. Okay, that also works.
If a tzaddik is a tzaddik, and they claim to be a tzaddik, are they praising themselves or just stating a fact?
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Male or female? If I say I'm a male, am I praising myself or am I stating a fact?
So there's a teaching from the previous Rebbe that says that just like it's important for a person to know their shortcomings, to know their chesronot, to know the areas that they need to improve, a person also must know their ma'alot. A person has to know their strengths. So it doesn't mean that you need to walk around announcing it, but for yourself, you need to know that. A person should know where they are. If I'm a tzaddik and I don't want to identify as such, then that's not a good thing. Because part of identifying in a certain way, it also helps us live up to that standard. There was once a disciple of one of the Rebbes that he would say that what prevents him from sinning is his ego. Because he would walk around saying, I'm an important disciple of the Rebbe. How could I do something like this? So if you walk around saying, I'm so important, respect me, then you have an ego problem. But if you say you use your ego for yourself, I'm so important, I can't do that. That's below my dignity. So that's a positive thing.
It's like accountability.
Exactly. Now, one thing that we're getting to right now is to understand that the way we may define tzaddik and define rasha, define benoni may be not accurate. And soon we'll see that that's very important. Now, why is that especially important for the study of Tanya? Because, as I quickly mentioned before, and I would like to elaborate a little more now, the Alter Rebbe says that the name of his book is called Sefer Shel Beinonim, the book of the Benoni. The book of the Benoni. What does that mean? That means that through this book, it helps each and every one of us be able to become a true Benoni. All right, so at least we know the bar is not that high. We're not trying to be a tzaddik. We're trying to just be a Benoni. Why are we trying to be a Benoni? Don't we think that probably most of us identify at least average? Probably few of us think of ourselves as a Rasha. So we're already a Benoni. What do I need the Tanya for? Well, if Rabbah said that he's a Benoni, and let's just take for an assumption that could be that he was speaking the truth and not being overly humble, he was just truly defining himself, then that means a Benoni is not necessarily how we misunderstood previously somebody who's got 50-50 on their behavior chart, but a Benoni is somebody who's got 100% on the behavior chart, but they're still not a tzaddik. What's a rasha? According to this definition, anybody who doesn't have 100% on their chart. Oh boy, now we're in deep trouble. Now suddenly he turned the whole thing around. Who's not a rasha? If graduating rasha means 100% on my behavior chart, that's quite a task. 100%? That's a big deal. And I'll just throw this in over here to make this sound even more grand, that we'll see later in the Tanya, that the Alter Rebbe actually tells us that it's not just a behavior chart. It's not just on my actions that define whether I'm Rasha or Benoni, but it's in my speech and in my thoughts. A Benoni is 100% in machshava, in thought, dibur, speech, and maaseh, in action. Never thinks something they shouldn't think. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Okay? But the Tanya is here to help every one of us, anybody, become a Benoni. That means any of us could reach a point that we can master 100% on our thought, speech, and action. Now, if this sounds like impossible, keep coming. And you'll learn the path. Actually, the story is told that the Alter Rebbe wrote another book called Sefer Shel Tzadikim, the book for the righteous. What happened to that book? So the story is that after he finished writing the book, a fire broke out and the book burnt. It's not meant for people, because tzaddikim is not within reach. Benoni, anybody could reach. Tzaddik, not so much. So ultimately what that means is that when we swore in heaven, before we came here, Tiyeh tzaddik ve'al tiyeh rasha, be righteous and don't be wicked, we actually didn't mean really righteous, we meant Benoni. That was the intent. The intent was Benoni. Okay? So what does that mean? How could we do that? So the first thing the Alter Rebbe says, before you get into this, you have to know who you are. You have to understand how you work. So many of us think, I know who I am. We go and have weekly or monthly or however frequent sessions with our therapist. We know who we are. We know what I could do, what I can't do, what's my style, what's not my style, what's good for me, what's not good for me. I know who I am. I know my limits. I don't need the Tanya to tell me who I am. So the Alter Rebbe says, well, not necessarily. I want to tell you something about yourself that you may not know. What does he say? He says that everything you think you know about yourself is only one dimension. It's only one layer of yourself. It's not that it's not true. It's true, or could be true. I'm not saying everything you think about yourself is true, but it could be true. But even that, it's only one layer. It's only one dimension of yourself. In the term of the Alter Rebbe, he says it's only one soul. You actually have two souls. There's two layers of truth within your existence, within your being. Most of us only become familiar or only aware of one layer. That layer, in the term of the Tanya, he calls it the Nefesh HaBehamit, the animal soul. The part of us that's just like an animal. What does it mean like an animal? What's wrong with an animal? Why are we calling it an animal? Because an animal lives, does what it needs to do to live. An animal has feelings, an animal has needs, and knows how to try to achieve that. It's good. There are animals that are kind, there are animals that are cruel. The same thing with humans. It's another species that instead of walking on four, walks on two. But it's essentially another type of animal. And everything that we technically know about ourselves is typically only within that realm, only within that dimension. But there is a deeper dimension. There's a deeper part of ourselves, which is actually another soul, which we call the Nefesh HaElokit, the godly soul. Today we're not going to talk about the godly soul. Today we're going to talk about the animal soul. That's the first thing the Alter Rebbe introduces in chapter 1, the animal soul. So let's take, for example, a person says, you know what? I love doing the right thing. I want to be a good person, like Jane was saying, right? I want to be kind. I want to help people. Somebody needs help. I want to be kind. I want to be helpful. But I have my limits. I'm a lazy type. So I can be helpful, but not, early in the morning. That doesn't work for me. That's not how it works. I'm kind of the lazy one. So anything past 2 p.m., you can call on me. But before that, there's others. There are people who are good in the morning. There are people who are good in the afternoon. So, I'm there to help. I'm a kind person. After 2 p.m., anytime. But, I'm lazy. Is it true that I'm lazy? Of course it's true. Can anybody else say it's not true? It is true. But the Alter Rebbe is telling you, well, it's true, but it's only true in the realm of your animal soul. You're not really lazy. Your animal soul is lazy. Because those kind of characteristics stem from the animal in you. There's another part of you that is greater than that doesn't have that limitation. Take another example. I'm not the serious type. So, for me to sit and study and focus, that's not my type. I can do other things. I can go to the hospital and cheer children who are ill. I can make them happy. Count on me for that. But if you need me to focus and to study and get serious, it's not my type. I don't do that. So I could be good, and I can do good with my style. That's true. But that is the limitation of your animal soul. It's not the limitation of your godly soul. There's another part of you which is deeper. And ultimately, what the Alter Rebbe is going to kind of get into is going to teach us how to be able to, number one, know how to identify our godly soul. Number two, how to access it. And number three, how to use that in channeling how we live our regular life through our animal soul with the influence of the godly soul. So it's not about saying, this is all the animal soul. We're going to teach you how to ignore that and disregard that and stop paying attention to that. And now you're only going to focus on the godly soul. That's not what's going to happen. It's about learning how to be able to bring the two together and ultimately let the godly soul lead and guide how the animal soul lives. And then when you live that way, you're not only good, but you become godly. There's a difference between good and godly. And that's the difference between, and if you want, for those who are comfortable with Hebrew, between tzodek and tzaddik. Tzodek means being correct, being right. Tzaddik means being righteous. When you're kind, you're tzaddik. You're right. You're doing the right thing. But you may not be tzaddik. To be tzaddik means you're being godly. There's a big difference between being right and being godly. Anybody could be right. Animals also could be right. There are many animals that are very kind. Animals are compassionate. If I'm not mistaken, there's an animal that cleans the teeth of the hippopotamus, no? Lawrence, you know that?
The fish, there's one that cleans the teeth of the fish. There's
Before he eats them.
a wrasse, I think it's called WRASSE. It's a fish that comes in and cleans the shark's teeth.
Oh, yeah? So you see, there's, animals could also be helpful, could be kind, could be compassionate, but they're not godly. Godliness is reserved for us humans. And that comes through a secondary soul, another part of us, but which we're going to address later. Today, the first thing we want to understand is that everything we think we know about ourselves and everything that we define ourselves by is typically the animal part of us. Now, I just want to wrap this in closing together with the opening idea that the chapter begins with, that oath that we swore before we came into the world. What's the point of taking an oath for something you have no concept over? It's like, imagine if I tell you, can you commit that you're going to give $1 million to something when you have no concept of what money is? You never heard about money, you don't know any. So yeah, sure, I'll give you $1 million, no problem. You don't know what it is. Is there any value to that? What's the value to commit to something you know nothing about? So what's the point of putting a soul under oath that it will be tzaddik and not rasha when it doesn't know what it means not to be tzaddik? So what's the point?
Well, I think it's because you're in heaven with Hashem, so even if you don't know what it is at the time or even consciously remember it once you're born, it's there. And
what does it do?
Well, it can subconsciously guide you until you learn about your godly soul.
Very good. You're on it. Amazing, Jane. Beautiful.
Philosophy major.
Yeah, there you go. So there's an interesting play on words that in Hebrew, shvuah, which is how you say oath, if you change that first letter, the shin, to a sin, which is interchangeable, you just move the dot, right, from the right to the left. So it becomes seva, or svua, which means to be satisfied. Sova means satiated. You're satisfied. So the purpose of a shvuah is lahasbiya, it's to satiate. It's to empower the soul with the sustenance that it needs to be able to be successful in the mission. So you're right, it's subconscious. And the goal of the Tanya is to make it conscious. That it shouldn't be subconscious. Because ultimately, that oath is telling the soul, when you're going to come into the world, you're going to think that you're something else. So let's empower that soul from before it comes to know that everything you're going to think you are is not who you truly are, because you've already been infused with the kochot, with the strengths that you need to be something better, something bigger, something greater, which is godly, which is to be a tzaddik. Not just tzodek, not just correct, but to be righteous. Being righteous means you're connecting with God. Obviously, there's lots more that could be talked about. But this is, in summary, the foundation of chapter 1. So to summarize again and conclude, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions. Number 1, we want to know that the definition of tzaddik, Beinoni, and Rasha is not what we may have first thought it is. And ultimately, the Beinoni, which is what we're going to focus on, is an individual who has mastered 100% perfection in his thought, speech, and action. And that's accessible to each and every one of us. How? Because we have a godly soul. But what does that got to do with me? I don't know it. I'm, just a regular animalistic individual. Well, before you even came here, before you even started, before you even connected with your animal soul, you were already empowered in heaven to know and to connect to this truth of the godly soul, of the tzaddik. And therefore, no matter where you are in your life today, and no matter how you feel about your reality, you should know that you have the ability to be able to tap into that deeper layer of yourself. And when you do that, you can access powers that you never knew you had. You can actually overcome your laziness. You can overcome your inabilities that you think you have to be able to focus and to study and to be serious for a few moments. You can overcome your passion for worldly temptations. Like I'm a good person. I want to help people. But, I also really like cheesecake and I also really like a good steak. And, I'm into those things. So, leave me alone. Don't tell me I got to sometimes, cut back a little bit. You have the power to be able to overcome any of these limitations you think you're bound by. Because even before you started, you were satiated. You were given, you're fully, you're fueled up to the top of your lid with all the powers that you need to be able to be godly. And that ultimately is why you're here in this world, which is something we're going to talk about later as well. That's why you're here. You're here to be able to show that in a world where it seems like being animalistic is the way to be, you can shine the light of God, which you have in you. That's the true essence of who you are. You can shine that in the world. And when you do that, you can actually live in a manner that is 100% perfection in thought, speech, and action. And don't worry, that doesn't mean you're going to change. It doesn't mean you're going to not like the things you like, and you're not going to want the things you want. Don't worry, you're still going to be normal. You're still going to be human. Everything is going to be the same. But you're going to always do the right thing. If you think that's impossible, then keep coming and you'll see there's a path for it. All right?
It's interesting to connect that to Hileb Adam Ra Mineurorav. He had the oath to be a tzaddik,
Right.
but the Torah says how bad.
The Torah says, the heart of man is bad from his youth. True, yes.
It's true.
So how does that work?
He has the experience.
He's seen it firsthand. Yeah. But ultimately, the response to that is that is the animal part of us. The animal part of us is the part that we could say is bad. The godly soul is pure. It doesn't have bad. But we don't necessarily know about it.
Rabbi,
Yes.
you were talking about a tzaddik being most of the time